of women, on the condition of the world's children, on issues relating to education, health. And the second area of work was essentially in terms of the relationship between developed and developing countries, North and South. But all of this was being done in separate compartments. I believe that Mehbooba's greatest contribution to our work was that he brought this together and changed the context in which this work was done. First, to the very concept of human development, he made us see a lot of this work as part of one whole, rather than as separate things which were being done as separate programs for education, for health, etc., etc. Second, he changed the focus of development policy with regard to these. All of these things were being done, but they were always treated as subsidiary to the principal concerns of development policy. The last 4 chapters in every development plan. What he did, besides helping us to bring all of these things together, was to shift the searchlight of analysis and later of policy onto these magnitudes through his strong emphasis that what development does for the dignity of each human being separately and individually is the central object of policy. And these are the 2 senses in which what he did with our work was really to change the context, to move it from a series of separate programs to something which was seen as being linked through the concept of human development and as something which was central to the objects and concerns of development policy. This, I believe, is his most profound and deepest contribution, which has truly energized work on development in the United Nations over the years that Mehbooba contributed to our processes here. But it was not just that. Mehbooba was also a role model for us. His boldness of thinking, his willingness to quote controversy. You saw enough of that in the video clips that you saw. He was never afraid to quote controversy. His openness to the world outside, particularly the academic world. The way in which he brought in very eminent academics into the whole process. His strong belief in the importance of communicating these principles. You see that famous hourglass, the champagne glass figure there, which has had a profound impact in the way in which people think of issues about distribution of income. The clarity and eloquence of his own statements, which again you saw a lot of there. All of that was also very important. The Human Development Index itself was essentially a communication tool which he developed. And that also was something which we learned. So that our work had to be seen not simply as good, solid analytical work done for intergovernmental processes or other purposes, but also work which had to communicate to a broader, wider audience and change people's way of thinking about development. Well, I've spoken essentially on behalf of all of the people who work in development in the United Nations, but I must add a personal comment. And one of the things that, coming from the part of the world that I do come from, I truly appreciate, and which really moved me, was the strong emphasis that Mehbooba placed on what could be done to promote peace and amity in the part of the world that both of us came from. I think my last meeting with him was when he was in Delhi as part of that whole process of work. This is, of course, something which concerns us who come from that part of the world, perhaps far more than it concerns the rest of the world. But I do feel that on a more personal note, that this is also an area of work where I was deeply touched, deeply moved. But above all, I will miss him as a friend who was always available as a source of support, as a source of advice, and a source of courage in ensuring that you did what you had to do. But we are not here to mourn. I believe we are here to celebrate. And what we are here to celebrate is really a life which in every sense of the word was well lived. Thank you.
Dear Bani Farhan, I think this is not very easy for me to do. Mahbubul Haq came into my life when we were all working together in the Planning Commission on the third five-year plan in Pakistan. He was not there when I joined. We heard that this brilliant chief economist was coming. I was at that time the head of the health section, and we had some very ambitious goals. But our resources were far too small. But I knew something about the man who was coming. I had heard that he had a vision of ending poverty in Pakistan. I left him a note, having tried to persuade the previous chief economist that health needed more, that we needed to put substance to our statement that this plan was going to raise the levels of living of people in Pakistan, and that health was an essential part of that goal. His response was swift and quick. He doubled our allocation. Mahbub was known even then for his brilliant mind and his mastery of economic theory. But he also had a very clear sense of what he was trying to achieve and a very simple and direct way of communicating it. He would talk with anyone, from his fellow experts, policymakers, presidents, prime ministers, but to the most junior colleague and workers in the field. One of his most endearing qualities, which also enabled him to do his work so effectively, to get so many loyal and devoted friends, was his complete lack of interest in status, titles, and ranks. In personal as well as professional relationship, what mattered to him was the quality of a person's intelligence and ideas. He brought these qualities to the UNDP when he started the Human Development Report. In putting the report together, I remember the first year when he had this wonderful idea, he consulted with every single person, I think, in the system. Not an easy thing to do. He intended and he wanted that the report should have the backing of everyone in the whole system. I think he tried hard. I'm not sure that he always succeeded, but certainly his Human Development Index brought all of us to start to think about people and how our programs affected people. I was always arguing with him that women's reproductive health and family planning must be an essential part of his Human Development Index. He listened to me very carefully. He always listened. And he said to me, provide me the data. Of course, I didn't have that data at that time. And of course, I told him that one reason that there were no good figures was no one had paid enough attention to this issue. But he was correct on his insistence. But you all saw the Human Development Report of 1995, which he produced for the Women's Conference, which precisely then gave life to women's work and their contribution when they could make choices on the lack of it and the fact that so much of their work was just not counted. Mahbub had a unique ability to see global issues from the perspective of the whole United Nations system, including the Bretton Woods organizations. He linked social and economic issues in a way that was well ahead of most thinkers about the future of development and of the United Nations system as a whole. He had a vision also for the United Nations, and I hope that that vision will be realized. We must make it happen. In his book, The Poverty Curtain, he said, political vision is one of the scarcest commodities in the world today, and it still remains the scarcest commodity. But it was certainly a quality he had in full measure. He was a global thinker, but he never lost his connections with his roots in South Asia or with his first passion, which was to end poverty and to promote peace in the subcontinent. Before he died, he was full of ideas of how he could connect the two things, of how he could bring India, Pakistan closer together, how he could move things for people in the subcontinent. He was very clear that regional security meant not national security through military, so much as the security of the individual. Up to the time he died, so early and so untimely, his passion was for peace and for the individual human being as the starting point for achieving it. Bani, Farhan, Tornima, my sincere condolences, and our pledge that we will continue to work to bring his vision to reality, at least in our life.